The air inside the hotel room was thick with the scent of sweat and desire. The sheets beneath my body damp from the heat of our movements. My breath came in short gasps as I clung to him, nails digging into his back as he thrust into me with a force that made my entire body tremble. His name slipped from my lips like a plea, a desperate whisper swallowed by the low moans escaping his throat. God, Emma. His voice was rough, almost feral, as he gripped my waist tighter, his fingers bruising against my skin. You feel so damn good. I arched my back, meeting him stroke for stroke, drowning in the sensation of him filling me completely. The way his hands roamed over my body, possessive, greedy, made my head spin, made me forget everything except this moment. I had lost control the second I stepped into this room, the second I let him pull me into his arms and crush his lips against mine. I wasn't supposed to be here. I wasn't supposed to let this happen, but the way Ethan touched me, the way he made me feel like I was the only thing that mattered in the world. It was impossible to resist. His lips trailed along my neck, biting down just hard enough to make me whimper. Before he soothed the sting with his tongue, my legs tightened around his waist, urging him deeper, and he groaned into my skin. You drive me fucking insane, he muttered against my ear, his breath hot and ragged. I can't get enough of you. Neither could I. I didn't know when it had started, this dangerous affair between us. At first it had been innocent, harmless flirting, teasing glances exchanged across crowded rooms. But then one night he had kissed me, a reckless, heated kiss that had left me breathless and aching for more. And now here we were, tangled in sheets soaked with sweat and lust, losing ourselves in each other over and over again. A sharp gasp escaped me as he suddenly flipped us over, pinning me beneath him, his dark eyes burning with something raw and primal. He smirked, running a hand down my body, fingertips tracing the curve of my hip before slipping between my thighs. You like being at my mercy, don't you? He murmured, his lips brushing against mine. I didn't answer, couldn't answer, because his fingers were already moving, coaxing me towards the edge with slow, deliberate strokes. My back arched, my body tightening around him, and he swallowed my moans with another searing kiss. I had never felt anything like this before. With him it was different. It was wild, uncontrollable, like we were both on the verge of self-destruction, and neither of us cared. I clawed at his shoulders, pulling him down, needing more, needing everything. He cursed under his breath, burying himself inside me with a force that left me breathless. Our bodies moved together in a frantic, desperate rhythm, chasing a pleasure that felt almost dangerous in its intensity. It didn't matter that this was wrong. It didn't matter that, deep down, I knew we were playing with fire. All that mattered was the way he made me feel, the way he consumed me, body and soul. And in this moment, I didn't care about the consequences. I lay beside him, my body still tingling from the aftermath of our reckless passion. The hotel room was dimly lit, the glow of the bedside lamp casting long shadows across the tangled sheets. My skin was still slick with sweat, my breath uneven as I stared at the ceiling trying to collect my thoughts. Ethan lay next to me, his arm draped lazily over my waist, his fingers idly tracing circles against my hip. I could feel the heat of his body against mine, the steady rise and fall of his chest as he caught his breath. You're quiet, he murmured, pressing a soft kiss against my shoulder. I swallowed, my mind clouded with guilt, and something far more dangerous, desire. I shouldn't be here. He chuckled low and husky. You always say that. And yet, he tilted my chin towards him, his lips brushing against mine. You always come back. I closed my eyes, hating how easily I melted into his touch. This is wrong, Ethan. We can't keep doing this. He let out a breath, his hand tightening on my waist. Why? Because of Lucas. My heart clenched at the mention of my fiancé's name. Lucas, the man I was supposed to marry, the man who trusted me, the man whose half-brother I had just spent the night with. I turned away from Ethan, shame burning my skin. Yes, I whispered. Because of him. Ethan sat up, running a hand through his tousled dark hair. Lucas doesn't deserve you, Emma. His voice was sharp, edged with something I couldn't quite place. You know that. I clenched the sheets in my fists, my chest tightening. You don't get to decide that. He let out a bitter laugh. Maybe not. But tell me this, when you're with him, do you feel this? His fingers traced down my spine, sending a shiver through me. Do you burn for him the way you burn for me? I bit my lip, refusing to answer, because we both knew the truth. Ethan cupped my face, forcing me to look at him. His gaze was dark, intense. He doesn't know you like I do, Emma. He never will. I shook my head, trying to push him away, but he held firm. This isn't about him, Ethan. This is about us. Whatever this is, it's a mistake. He smirked, but there was something dangerous in his eyes. A mistake? Is that what you tell yourself when you're screaming my name? Heat flared through me, but I shoved it down, fighting to regain control. I have to go. I sat up, reaching for my clothes, but Ethan grabbed my wrist, pulling me back against him. His lips ghosted over my ear, his breath warm against my skin. You don't want to leave. I did. I had to. But my body betrayed me, sinking against him as he kissed my shoulder, my neck. His hands roaming over my bare skin like he owned me. You belong to me, Emma, he murmured, his voice dripping with possessiveness. You always have. A part of me wanted to believe him. A part of me wanted to stay. But I couldn't. I wrenched myself from his grasp, scrambling off the bed. This has to stop. My voice wavered, but I forced myself to meet his gaze. I'm marrying Lucas. Something flickered in Ethan's expression, something cold, unreadable. We'll see about that. I didn't give him a chance to say more. I grabbed my clothes and hurriedly dressed, my hands shaking as I buttoned my blouse. As I reached for the door, Ethan spoke again, his voice soft but laced with an underlying threat. You'll come back to me, Emma. I turned to face him one last time, my chest tight with conflicting emotions. You don't know that. His smirk was slow, confident. Oh, but I do. And deep down I was terrified he was right. I barely remembered the drive home. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, my mind spinning with everything that had just happened. The taste of Ethan still lingered on my lips, his touch still burned against my skin, and no matter how hard I tried to push him out of my thoughts, he was still there, haunting me, consuming me. I pulled into the driveway of the house I shared with Lucas, my stomach twisting with guilt. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the front door, willing myself to step inside and pretend that nothing was wrong. Pretend that I was the devoted fiancé Lucas thought I was. Pretend that I hadn't just spent the night in another man's bed. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car and forced a smile onto my face as I walked inside. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, and there he was, Lucas, standing by the kitchen counter, pouring himself a cup. He turned to me with a warm smile, his eyes soft, trusting. Morning, baby, he greeted, setting his cup down to wrap his arms around me. I was starting to get worried. You didn't answer my texts last night. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. I hesitated, my mind scrambling for an excuse. I stayed over at Mia's place. We had a few drinks and I didn't want to drive home. The lie slipped from my lips so easily, and that terrified me more than anything. Lucas pressed a kiss to my forehead, completely oblivious. I wish you'd called me. I would have come to pick you up. Guilt coiled in my stomach like a venomous snake, and I forced a laugh, stepping out of his embrace. It was late. I didn't want to wake you. He smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. You know you can always wake me up, right? I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. If only he knew. If only he knew where I really was last night. What I had done. Who I had done it with. I turned away before he could see the shame in my eyes. I need to take a shower. I hurried upstairs, locking the bathroom door behind me before stripping off my clothes. Stepping under the scalding water, I scrubbed my skin raw, as if I could wash away the evidence of Ethan's touch. But no matter how hard I tried, I could still feel him. His lips. His hands. His voice whispering sinful promises against my ear. I pressed my forehead against the cool tile, a strangled sob escaping my lips. This had to stop. I had to stop. And yet deep down I knew I wouldn't. The next few days passed in a blur. I avoided Ethan at all costs, ignoring his texts, his calls, pretending like that night never happened. But no matter how hard I tried to push him out of my mind, he was always there, lingering like a dark shadow I couldn't escape. And then, everything came crashing down. I had just gotten home from work when I heard voices coming from the living room. At first, I thought Lucas had a friend over, but as I stepped closer, my blood ran cold. I knew that voice. Ethan. My heart slammed against my ribs as I turned the corner and saw them. Lucas sitting on the couch, a beer in his hand, and Ethan leaning against the fireplace, a smirk playing on his lips. "You're home," Lucas said, smiling as he motioned for me to come over. "I wanted to surprise you. My brother's in town." Brother. The word echoed in my head, making me dizzy. No, this wasn't happening. I looked at Ethan, my breath catching in my throat. He met my gaze with a knowing smirk, amusement dancing in his dark eyes. "Emma," he drawled, his voice laced with something dangerous. "It's good to finally meet you." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My entire body felt like it was on fire, every nerve ending screaming as the reality of the situation crashed over me like a tidal wave. Ethan was Lucas's brother, half-brother, and I had slept with him more than once. My stomach twisted violently, nausea clawing at my throat. Lucas grinned, completely unaware of the tension suffocating the room. "Ethan just got back into town, so I invited him to stay for dinner. Hope you don't mind." Mind? I felt like I was going to be sick. Ethan's gaze flickered to me, his smirk deepening. "I hope that's okay with you, Emma." I clenched my fists at my sides, forcing a tight smile. "Of course," I choked out. It's great to meet you." Liar. Dinner was torture. I could barely eat, barely speak, my entire body on edge with Ethan sitting across from me, his gaze burning into my skin. He was enjoying this, enjoying watching me squirm, knowing exactly what we had done, what we had shared. Lucas was oblivious, laughing, drinking, completely unaware of the war raging inside me. At one point I excused myself, locking myself in the bathroom and gripping the edge of the sink, trying to steady my breathing. This couldn't be happening. I had to end this. I had to make Ethan understand that whatever this was, it was over. I needed to talk to him. Alone. Later that night, after Lucas had gone to bed, I found Ethan outside on the back patio, a cigarette between his fingers. He turned when he heard me, exhaling a slow stream of smoke. "Took you long enough," he mused. I crossed my arms over my chest, trying to ignore the way my body reacted to him even now. "What the hell are you doing here?" He smirked, flicking ash onto the ground. "What does it look like?" "I'm reconnecting with my dear brother." I clenched my jaw. "You know what I mean." He took a step closer, his eyes dark and unreadable. "Why are you so nervous, Emma?" He tilted his head, his voice dripping with amusement. "Afraid Lucas will find out about us?" I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering. "There is no us." His smirk didn't waver. "You keep telling yourself that." My nails dug into my palms. "I mean it. Ethan, whatever happened between us, it was a mistake." He laughed low and mocking. "Funny, you didn't seem to think it was a mistake when you were begging me to fuck you." Heat rushed to my face, a mix of anger and shame twisting inside me. "Stop it." He stepped closer, so close I could feel the heat radiating off him. "You want me to stop? Fine. Tell me you don't want me, Emma. Look me in the eye and tell me that when you're lying in bed with him at night, you don't think about me." I opened my mouth but nothing came out, because he was right. I hated him for it, but he was right. His lips curled into a knowing smirk. "That's what I thought." I shook my head, stepping back. "This has to end." Ethan exhaled, flicking his cigarette onto the ground. "Oh, Emma," he murmured, his voice dark and taunting. "We're just getting started." And for the first time, I realized just how much danger I was really in. I didn't sleep that night. Even with Lucas's warm arms wrapped around me, even with his steady breathing against my neck, my mind refused to quiet down. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was Ethan's smirk, his dark, taunting gaze, the way his voice had slithered through my skin like poison. "We're just getting started." A threat. Promise. And I had no idea how to stop it. Morning came too quickly, and I felt like a ghost as I moved through the motions of getting ready. Lucas noticed. "You okay, babe?" he asked, watching me from the bed, his brow furrowed. I forced a smile, tucking my hair behind my ear. "Yeah, just didn't sleep well." He reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. If work is stressing you out, just take a day off. We can do something together. Guilt twisted in my stomach. Lucas was so good. So kind. And I was the worst kind of person. I'll be fine, I said quickly, pressing a kiss to his cheek before grabbing my purse. I should go. As I turned toward the door, I nearly collided with Ethan. He was leaning against the frame, dressed in nothing but sweatpants, his toned chest on full display. He looked at me like he knew. Like he could still feel the way my body had melted under his hands. "Morning, sweetheart," he drawled, his lips twitching. I stiffened. "Ethan." Lucas, completely oblivious, grinned. "You guys should have breakfast together. I'll be home late tonight so you two can get to know each other better." No, absolutely not. But before I could protest, Ethan smirked. "Sounds like a great idea." The moment Lucas left, I turned on Ethan, my voice sharp. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He simply poured himself a cup of coffee, completely unfazed. "Having breakfast with my dear little brother's fiancé. Isn't that what he wanted?" I clenched my fists. "You need to stop this. Now." He sipped his coffee, his gaze burning into mine. "Stop what, exactly?" "You know what," I snapped. "You showing up here. The way you look at me. The way you—" "Fuck you, senseless," he interrupted, a wicked smirk playing on his lips. Heat flared up my neck, a dangerous mix of rage and something else. Something I refused to name. His smirk widened. "Don't look so scandalized, Emma. It's not like you didn't love every second of it." I sucked in a sharp breath, my nails digging into my palms. "You're sick." Ethan chuckled, setting his mug down before stepping toward me. I took a step back. He took another step forward. I backed up until my spine hit the kitchen counter. He placed his hands on either side of me, caging me in. My pulse roared in my ears. "You can pretend all you want," he murmured, his voice dark and teasing. "But we both know the truth, don't we?" I swallowed hard, refusing to meet his gaze. "You want this," he whispered, his lips inches from mine. "You want me." I shook my head. "I hate you." His fingers skimmed down my arm, sending a traitorous shiver through me. "Lies." I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block him out. "I love Lucas." Ethan hummed, his breath ghosting against my cheek. "Maybe. But do you want him the way you want me?" My silence was answer enough. He tilted my chin up, forcing me to look at him. "Say the word, Emma," he murmured, his voice dripping with sin. "Tell me to stop and I will." I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. His lips brushed against mine. Soft and slow, a deliberate torture. My body betrayed me, leaning into him, craving the very thing I should have been running from. And then, just as quickly as he had closed the distance, he pulled away, a dark smile curling on his lips. "See," he whispered. "You're mine, whether you admit it or not." I felt like I couldn't breathe. And the worst part? He was right. The next week was pure agony. Ethan was everywhere. Sitting across from me at dinner, lingering in doorways, brushing past me just enough to set my skin on fire. And Lucas? He was completely unaware. Treating Ethan like the long-lost brother he never had. Excited to have him back in his life. It was unbearable. I needed to put an end to it. So when Ethan left for the bar one night, I followed him. I found him in a corner booth, a drink in hand, watching me with that same damn smirk. "Emma," he greeted, his voice a low purr. "Finally decided to stop fighting it?" I sat across from him, my jaw tight. "I need to know why you're doing this." He arched a brow. "Doing what?" "Ruining my life." He laughed, swirling his drink. "Oh, sweetheart. You ruined your own life the moment you let me fuck you." My nails dug into my palms. "You planned this, didn't you?" His smirk faltered for just a moment, something darker flashing in his eyes. And then I realized he had planned this. "You knew who I was before we even met, didn't you?" My voice trembled with realization. "You knew I was with Lucas." Ethan's jaw clenched. But he said nothing. I swallowed hard. "Why?" A long silence stretched between us. And then finally he leaned in, his voice dangerously soft. "Because your fiancé's father ruined my mother's life." My blood turned to ice. "What?" I whispered. Ethan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Lucas's father had an affair with my mother, got her pregnant, and when she begged him for help, he turned his back on us. His voice grew colder. He left her to raise me alone while he went on to play happy family with Lucas's mom. My chest tightened. I had no idea. Lucas had never mentioned this. Ethan took another sip of his drink. I grew up watching my mother struggle, all because of him. While Lucas lived in a big house with 2 loving parents, I was picking up the pieces of a broken woman. My stomach churned. So what? This is revenge. Ethan's gaze darkened. Something like that. I felt sick. I stood abruptly. You're a monster. He grabbed my wrist before I could leave, his grip firm but not painful. You think I'm the monster? His lips curled into a cruel smile. Then what does that make you? I ripped my arm away, my hands trembling. I didn't have an answer, because deep down I already knew. I couldn't escape the truth. It was woven into every breath I took, lingering in the space between right and wrong, between love and betrayal. Ethan had set this trap long before I ever walked into his arms, but the worst part? I had let him. And now I was drowning in a web of lies too tangled to unravel. Lucas came home late that night. His tie was loose, his shirt slightly wrinkled, exhaustion clear in his features. He smiled when he saw me sitting on the couch, my hands clenched in my lap, my heart hammering so violently I thought it might tear through my ribs. Hey babe, you're still up. I forced a smile, nodding. Yeah, couldn't sleep. He sat beside me, pressing a soft kiss to my temple. Work has been killing me lately, but I was thinking, maybe we should take a trip. Just the 2 of us. Get away from everything for a bit. My throat closed up. I wanted to scream, to tell him everything, to beg him to take me away before it was too late. But the words refused to come out. Ethan was still out, or at least I thought he was. But when I looked up, he was standing at the top of the stairs watching us, watching me. And in that moment I knew he wasn't going to stop. Not until everything burned. I should have told Lucas right then. I should have confessed the truth, thrown myself at his mercy, given him the chance to walk away before the damage became irreversible. But I was a coward. I let him kiss me goodnight, let him whisper how much he loved me, let him fall asleep beside me while the storm inside me raged on. I barely lasted an hour before slipping out of bed, my feet carrying me down the hall before I could stop myself.
Ethan's door was cracked open.
He was waiting for me. I stepped inside, shutting the door behind me, my pulse a frantic mess. You need to leave. He tilted his head, his smirk infuriatingly calm. You came to me. I came to tell you to stop this. My voice shook. Lucas doesn't deserve this. He doesn't deserve you. Ethan leaned back against the dresser, arms crossed over his chest, amusement flickering in his eyes. And you do. I flinched. I never meant. Don't, he cut in, his voice sharp. Don't stand there and act like you're innocent. You wanted this as much as I did. Maybe even more. Tears burned at the edges of my vision. I love him. Ethan laughed, the sound bitter. And yet, you're here. I hated him. I hated him for being right, for tearing me apart so effortlessly. He pushed off the dresser, closing the space between us in 2 slow steps. Tell me to leave, Emma. If you really want me gone, say it. Right now. My lips parted. Nothing came out. His fingers skimmed down my arm, barely touching, but enough to send a shiver through me. That's what I thought. I squeezed my eyes shut. I hate you. No, sweetheart, he murmured, his breath warm against my skin. You hate yourself. And maybe he was right. Maybe I did. Because the moment his lips crashed against mine, I didn't pull away. I didn't fight him. I let him consume me, ruin me, drag me deeper into the abyss. I woke up tangled in his sheets, my body aching. My heart shattered beyond repair. The sun was barely rising, the world still quiet, and for a brief moment, I let myself believe it was all a dream. That I could still wake up in Lucas's arms and pretend none of this had ever happened. But then Ethan shifted beside me, his arm draped over my waist, his fingers tracing lazy circles against my hip. Morning, sweetheart, he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. I bolted upright, my chest heaving. This can't keep happening. He propped himself up on one elbow. watching me with a satisfied smirk. It already has. I threw the sheets off me, grabbing my clothes from the floor with trembling hands. I mean it, Ethan. It's over. He didn't stop me. Didn't chase after me. He just lay there, smug and victorious, like he knew I was lying. I barely made it back to my room before Lucas stirred, his arms instinctively reaching for me. Guilt nearly suffocated me. How much longer could I keep this up? How much longer before everything collapsed? The answer came sooner than I expected. That evening, Lucas suggested dinner with Ethan. One last attempt to welcome his long-lost brother into the family. I nearly refused, but the look in his eyes made my stomach twist. He was trying so hard to make this work, to keep us together. And I was tearing him apart behind his back. So I agreed. The restaurant was quiet, candlelit, the kind of place reserved for special occasions. Lucas was smiling, his hand warm over mine. His love for me so painfully obvious it made me sick. Ethan sat across from us, his expression unreadable, his fingers tapping against his glass in an almost lazy rhythm. Halfway through dinner, Lucas excused himself to take a call, leaving me alone with Ethan. The moment he was gone, Ethan leaned forward, his voice low. How long are you going to keep pretending? My fingers tightened around my fork. I don't know what you're talking about. He chuckled. Sure you do. I exhaled shakily. I told you it's over. Ethan's smirk didn't waver. Then why do you keep looking at me like that? I snapped my gaze to his, fury bubbling beneath my skin. You want me to admit it? Fine. I made a mistake. I should have never. Lucas's voice cut through the air like a knife. Never what? My heart stopped. He was standing behind me, his face carefully blank, but his eyes, God. His eyes were filled with something I had never seen before. Something dark. Something broken. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Ethan leaned back, his expression maddeningly calm. Well, brother. Looks like you caught us. Lucas didn't move. Didn't speak. The silence stretched, suffocating, unbearable. Then in one swift motion, he grabbed Ethan by the collar, dragging him up from his seat. Glasses shattered, chairs scraped against the floor. Gasps echoed around us, but all I could focus on was Lucas's voice, raw and laced with betrayal. You were my brother. Ethan didn't fight back. He just smiled, a slow, cruel thing. And you were his son. Lucas's grip tightened. His jaw clenched. His entire body trembled with barely contained rage. You did this to hurt me. Ethan's smirk didn't waver. And it worked. Lucas let go so suddenly that Ethan stumbled back. For the first time since I met him, Ethan actually looked caught off guard. But Lucas didn't turn to him. He turned to me. My throat burned. Lucas, don't. His voice was hollow. Tears blurred my vision. Please. His expression didn't change. Was it worth it? I sucked in a shaky breath, the weight of my choices crashing down on me. Was it? Had I destroyed everything for this? Ethan exhaled, brushing dust off his shirt. Well, that was fun. Lucas didn't even look at him. He just shook his head, his entire body tense with barely restrained emotion. And then without another word, he walked away. I wanted to go after him, to beg for forgiveness, but my feet wouldn't move. Ethan watched me, his smirk finally fading. For the first time he looked almost regretful. But it was too late. Everything was already ruined.